Hello. Let me introduce to you the speaker for this presentation. Her name is Dr. Nancy Muturi. She is a professor in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at Kansas State University and specializes in strategic communication. She teaches graduate and undergraduate courses in public relations, health communication, gender and diversity issues in the media, as well as communication for social change. Her research is in health communication, with focus on HIV and AIDS in Africa and the Caribbean, and health disparities in the United States. She has worked as a health communication specialist for the University of the West Indies HIV and AIDS Response Program in the Caribbean. Before her Caribbean experience, Dr. Muturi worked at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. She has also worked with several agencies in Kenya, her native country, including the Kenyan government and with nonprofit and community-based organizations. She has also consulted with several international organizations, including CEDA, UNICEF, and UNESCO in Africa and the Caribbean. Her professional interests have been on reproductive health, HIV and AIDS, and more recently on nutrition-related issues among children. The presentation that you will listen to today is a part of a longer presentation on strategic presentation that Dr. Muturi had given earlier. In this segment, she focuses on the do's and don'ts of effective communication across cultures.
Important. So let's now talk about the do's and don'ts of international communication and networking. So when you're communicating with other people of different cultures, one thing we should never do is to assume that you know about their own culture. So let them talk about it. You may be saying something that is not correct, and sometimes it could be very offensive. You have also to assume, you cannot assume that others represent their own culture. So when you see one person, you cannot assume that they represent their whole country or their whole culture. There are some topics that we should also avoid. For example, some general topics, including politics, other topics like gender and sexuality, sexual orientation. These are topics that we should avoid as much as possible. Religion is also another topic that we can also try to avoid, unless this is the main topic of discussion, but it may it could contribute to some controversies that you don't want to get yourself into. We also must avoid assuming that people are ignorant just because they do not know about our own cultures. So we, by informing them and telling them and talking about them, you are kind of educating them rather than assuming that they do not know. We do also have to avoid displaying some of the negative attitudes we have about just different cultural beliefs and values. For example, you may go to somebody's house and they value pets and they have their own beliefs. You would not, if you don't have pets, you don't like them, you cannot just portray those kind of negative attitudes, because that could be sending us a very different message. We also try to avoid translating jokes. Jokes are not culturally translatable. So as much as possible, you can avoid that from a communication perspective, because that could also be translated into something very differently.
This is the end of part 1 of Do's and Don'ts of Intercultural Communication and Networking. Please continue listening on part 2.